I want to begin by asking our American panelist, Mr. Rubin, how long do you think, though, Mr. Trump, the president-elect, will be able to last? Not to mention make America great again, to last in his presidential post.
Well, good morning, and thank you for having me here. Lasting in his presidential post is a very intriguing question, and it's certainly one that many people in Washington are asking. This has been a very rocky transition for the president-elect. His approval ratings are now at a lower level than the actual vote percentage he received. He's at 37% approval. And there are deep questions being raised by the government ethics watchdog and leading Republican ethics officials, former officials as well, about his inability to divest from his company and the position that puts him in against the Constitution and a clause called the emoluments clause, which he apparently could be in violation of. So we'll see how this administration unfolds, but certainly at this stage, they have not had a very easy transition heading into inauguration day.
Mr. Yuan Peng here in Beijing, you are China's American expert in a way. How much of a survival would a president in American history, which was elected out of a divided country?
It's very hard for a divided country to be governed by a new president. In particular, this very unprecedented president-elect, Donald Trump, because first of all, he can make use of grassroots to make his election winning. But when he governs, he has to deal with the elites, those elites inside the Beltway. But he always has some problems with the establishment and the elites. So how to have better relations between himself and the elites inside the Beltway is one, the first challenge. And secondly, how to reunite his own party, that means the Republican Party. He is a Republican Party, but he is a unique Republican Party member. So the established Republican Party members, on the one hand, use Trump to defeat Obama's legacy, but on the other hand, for example, in his Russian policy, he keep distance. So how to deal with his own party is another test.
Not to talk about the politics, even begin from ideologies. As we all know, when a president talks to a country, he probably has to use the kind of spiritual power in a way to lead the country forward. But obviously, President-elect Trump seemed to echo with some, but certainly goes against the others' ideologies. Mr. Trump, for example, at his latest news conference Wednesday, the president-elect refused to hear a question coming from a CNN reporter. Take a look at this.
Don't be.
Can you give us a question?
I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Well, it's just one of those little minor soundbite out of a long battle between the press and Mr. Trump. So, Mr. Blakeman, when inside the Beltway, at least the fourth force, as they say, the media is now going totally almost against Mr. Trump, the president-elect. How long will he survive? Will he survive as well as he did during the campaign, in which people are pretty much fed up with the press anyway?
Yeah, I mean, he'll survive for 4 years because he's president for 4 years, and the press is going to have to live with Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is going to have to live with the president. But these are the president's events. They're not the press events. So they'll abide by his rules, and if they don't like it, then I guess they won't cover him. But I can assure you, they will cover the president.
They will cover the president. It depends on how they will cover the president. But
That's
we were
right.
earlier,
Exactly.
Mr. Blakeman, debating about not necessarily 4 years, but really how long within this 4 years Mr. Trump will be able to last. If you take a look at his political appointees, for example, the Attorney General and the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, in their testimony on the Capitol Hill, all of them goes against some of the basic points that Mr. Trump used in his campaign. Waterboarding, ban Muslims, or Russia is a good friend, or the trashing of TPP. These ideas have been supported, rather, by some of the candidates that Mr. Trump himself appointed. So, a presidency already
Well,
have a divided administration.
No, they don't. As a matter of fact, some of the most successful presidential administrations have been those that have attracted people who are not necessarily in lockstep with the president. That's a healthy thing. If the president just wanted yes men and women around, he'd hire them. But he hired a diverse group of professionals that, yes, sometimes they'll disagree with the president, but most of the time they believe in what the president believes in. But you don't want sycophants surrounding the President of the United States. You want good, capable people who are going to try and convince him when they think he's wrong, and then go with him when they know he's right. That's healthy in business. It's healthy in government.
Mr. Blakeman is a cheerleader at this moment, at least for this debate. What about you, Mr. Rubin?
Well, I'd like to go back to the media issue. This was President-elect Trump's first public press conference in over 6 months. And the media is the media, but the media really is a tool for ensuring that the American people have information and access to information. And the concern with what happened the other day with the CNN reporter is that the president-elect seems to feel that it's okay to attack the media directly, but that essentially means that the American people will have less and less access to him and to open questions towards him. It's rare that he takes public questions. He tends to go in a direct communication method through Twitter. We do need to see a back and forth, and we saw it at these hearings. Going to the second part, this week, key leading officials coming into the administration did not agree on many core areas on foreign policy with the president-elect. And it's not to say that they have competing ideas and we need diversity. We always have to have diversity. Barack Obama hired his opponent for Secretary of State in 2008 and Hillary Clinton. It's clear they didn't always agree, but they have to at least have a shared vision. And that wasn't apparent this week in the hearings. It's not clear what the vision will be, certainly on foreign policy going forward. And that will create a lot of dysfunction in the early days, and that's a concern.
Talk about foreign policy. There's a huge divide in Washington at this moment. What's the attitude toward Russia? Mr. Blakeman, I have to invite you in on this as well. Some say this is already the first tug of war between Mr. Trump, president-elect, and all the establishment of the Republican Party. Obviously, Republican Party, for example, John McCain, a well-known Republican congressperson, and even the party head of the Republican Party on the Capitol Hill are pretty much going against Mr. Trump, who insists on having better relations with Russia. Mr. Blakeman.
Everybody wants better relations with Russia, but it's got to be on an equal footing. It's got to be good for the United States, and it's got to be good for Russia. Russia right now is an adversary. They're not necessarily an enemy. And any talk of war is absolute nonsense. But we're going to push back when it's in our interest to push back on Russia. And right now, because of the weakness of the United States and the failure of Barack Obama around the world, and particularly in Russia and the Middle East, it's time to get tough with Russia. And that doesn't mean that we're going to go to war, but it does mean that we're going to make sure that they're responsible in what they're doing beyond their borders. And we're going to hold them accountable. And that's what the American people expect, and that's what they voted for.
Well, Mr. Blakeman already see eye to eye with Mr. Rubin. Amazing. Mr. Rubin?
Well, if I may, though, on this, I agree with the argument that there needs to be a clear, strong voice towards Russia, and we've heard that from many leading congressional Republicans. When I worked at the State Department for Secretary Kerry, he oftentimes is very tough in promoting sanctions on Russia, particularly regarding Ukraine, and congressional Republicans supported that and wanted the Obama administration to go further. But President-elect Trump during the campaign did not want to go that far. In fact, he wanted to go in the opposite direction. And so again, the disconnect between what some of his appointees said this week and what some Republicans, Marco Rubio, Lindsey Graham, John McCain said versus what President-elect Trump said on the campaign trail, this disconnect is real. And it is ironic that he essentially said we need to have good relations, and it's okay if he likes me and I like him. That's the same kind of language that many leading Republican defense hawks have attacked over the years when President Obama said that, and when even President George W. Bush said that at his beginning of his first term.
A lot of these has a lot to do with what exactly President-elect believes and whether he is going to carry out what he believes into governing. Mr. Yuan, some have been suggesting the best scenario now for the U.S. president is a business person. And the worst scenario for the current US president is that he is a business person, meaning he could be pragmatic, but at the same time, he could also be trashing all the rules and the possibilities that has been taken as the ground rules before. Mr. Yuan, what do you think?
Yes, it's the base of the president-elect Trump is a businessman. But a businessman has two faces. One is a pragmatic, which can trade off on everything. The other thing is that he's very selfish when fulfill his own interest. So which face is his real face? And two faces, how to balance is something we need to wait and see. And beside this businessman style, he has several other identities. For example, he's a new person. In political circle, he's something new. And new means is always do something very surprising. And thirdly, he's an old man, which is more than 70 years old, which means his ideology, his value is hard to be changed. He's very stubborn in thinking what he thought correct. And fourthly, I think he's a successful person. He's a very good family, has very good business, has a very good score for winning the election.
Mark, but
so
okay,
he should be very, very self-confident. So all those four different identities emerge into one single person will make this guy is a totally different,
a very unique
people.
person, to say the least. You say we need to have patience, but some people do not have patience anymore for him to be the president of the United States. For example, the very well-known Oscar-winning actress Meryl Streep strongly criticized the U.S. President-elect Donald Trump as she received a Lifelong Achievement Award at the Golden Globe. We're all very familiar now with that footage. Take a look.
You and all of us in this room really belong to the most vilified segments in American society right now. Think about it. Hollywood, foreigners, and the press. So Hollywood is crawling with outsiders and foreigners. And if we kick them all out, you'll have nothing to watch but football and mixed martial arts, which are not the arts.
Well, anytime we look at that, there's laughter. There's also a little bit bitter smile sometimes on the face. Putting that aside, Hollywood, you already have their own comments, but what about America? Will America really great again? I want to go to you, Mr. Blakeman. You are more optimistic than the other two panelists, it seems. So with 35% tax on some of the imports coming from China, labeling China currency manipulator, trashing down the basic principles of U.S.-China relations, for example, concerning Taiwan, and building better relations with Russia out of support from the party, and also on some of the very difficult issues of foreign policy. Is Mr. Trump likely to make America great again? Whose America is it, and how great will it be?
Yeah, it's our America. We have nothing to apologize for. We're a great power, and we're going to deal on an equal footing with other great powers like China and Russia. But it's not going to be on their terms. It's going to be on mutually exclusive terms to the benefit of both. We have a weak president who you've taken advantage of, and the world's taken advantage of for 8 years. That's over. And now we have a strong president, like President Reagan. And he's going to rule out of principle and fairness. And the business quality of him, I think, is very refreshing, because a deal is only as good as it is for China and America if we're making a deal together.
Okay.
If you think you got a better bargain, then I'm going to think of a way to get out of the bargain. But if we both are happy with the bargain, we're going to honor it. And that's the hopefully the relationship we're going to have, not only economically, but also socially, culturally, militarily. That's what we need, better relations around the world.
Okay. Mr. Blakeman say everything almost is a bargain. Mr. Yuan, is it true? Can China accept that?
I think big powers, the first thing as a big power should be very principled. So not everything can be bargaining. The principle is the first that big power should hold. I think I agree that we all hope that American great again. Just like China, we want to be great again. Russia, great again. But the problem is that American great again should not in the sacrifice of other powers. So it's not in the price of Chinese, great power and Russia. So how to
Or
achieve
others, whoever
all
that
others?
country is.
How do you achieve this goal to make America greater again? And firstly, I think if a great American should be based on a united, American people, you cannot use this part of American people to defeat the other parts. Yes, grassroots help you to go to the White House,
Right.
but how to deal with the elites, how to deal with Hollywood, how to deal with Washington. So this is the first test. And
Okay.
secondly, I think you should keep the pace of the time. It's a new age of the world order, so you should find some new way to deal with China and Russia, not using the Cold War mindset. I think this is very important for him to reconsider.
That's an interesting point. Mr. Rubin, what do you think? Is Mr. Trump a leftover of the Cold War era? Or is Mr. Trump really leading the new thought of setting a new trend? That's a big question mark, isn't it?
Well, as a father of 3 young daughters, I see how much diversity they experience every day, how much integration they have with the rest of the world, frankly, through the internet and through communications technology. And we do need to look forward, not backward. I believe the premise of the question about making America great again is erroneous, though. America is great. We're doing well, but we have a long way to go. Both political parties found deep anxiety in this country, legitimate anxiety about the economic situation here across the country. There are deep concerns about America's role in the world, but we need to make sure that we don't make the kinds of errors that the Cold War produced. This is not a belligerent situation right now. It's not the US versus China, let's have a war. That should not be the discussion. There should be a discussion about how do we ensure that our economy is getting a fair deal and that the Chinese economy is growing and developing in a way that meets its own citizens' needs. I hope we get to that discussion. I fear that the language that we have currently experienced and what Meryl Streep was speaking to as well, albeit a bit differently, will prevent that kind of good discussion. That's what we need to have. But there are certainly no military solutions,
right.
as we saw this week in the Tillerson hearings, as a possibility. That would be a deep concern for both countries.
Before we go, I do want to have a final word from all of you, men with wisdom, I would say, the 3 of you. Just one sentence and one sentence alone. What is the thing you think President-elect Trump, when comes into office, should do, and what he should definitely not do? Just one simple sentence, Mr. Blakeman.
Well, he needs to be inclusive. He has to be bipartisan. He has to listen and he has to act.
Okay, Mr. Rubin.
I completely agree. He has to be inclusive. It's to the benefit of all Americans. He represents all of us today.
Mr. Yuan.
Doing anything in the future, he should have the double think and double check, rather than just using Twitter to express his very immature thinking.